It's good to know that you're still there. This is Breakfast Weekend if you're just joining us on Impact Africa Television, IATV. And we're kicking off our very first discussion segment where we'll be discussing the International Literacy Day for this year, which is tomorrow, really. And the theme for this year's celebration is literacy and multilingualism. Who better to talk about this with us than our guests, Mr. Dapola Sode, who's a public affairs analyst. Hello.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much. We also have Dr. Lanre Okuseindi. He's a language expert, basically.
Yes.
Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
So, when we're talking about literacy, oftentimes people are quick to talk about education, like we said earlier. Is it one and the same? Does one lead to the other? What exactly is the link?
Yes, literacy is simply the ability to read and write.
Okay.
And if you are able to read and write, then you are on your way to being educated. Because education simply means acquiring knowledge of many different things. And while you can be educated without being literate, because there are many people who are not literate, but are educated in the sense that they are aware of not only things around them, but even many things that we don't know about. For example, through experience, the issue of literacy and education is simply that if you are literate, you are able to acquire knowledge without anybody coming to tell you that this is it. I can go to a library, for example, and take a book concerning U.S. history, the American history, and I read about it, and then I become educated concerning that. So that's the good thing about literacy, the fact that you are able to acquire knowledge from far-flung areas, right? Not necessarily something that I'm telling you. If I educate you on something, then you are aware of it. But I don't have to have somebody telling me. All I need to do is simply go to a library or buy a book. So that's one of the things we preach when we're talking about literacy, the ability to read books and acquire knowledge as a result of that.
Okay. Mr. Olasode, let's look at our Nigerian society. It's been said often that we have a lot of educated people and not enough literate people, or too much literate people and not enough educated people. Sometimes it gets confusing. How would you assess the average Nigerian youth now?
Oh, wow. By that definition, thank you very much. By that definition, I would say that the average Nigerian youth is literate.
And not educated?
But the issue is, and by his definition, you would say that they are educated in the sense that they can read and write. The average Nigerian you can read and write. They also have information. But where I have a challenge with our generation is our ability to apply. Because the truth is, what you know that does not benefit both you or the society is a waste of time.
What may be responsible for that?
Well, several things. A value drain, for instance, and the importance. The average youth has come into a place where education has lost its importance. He can't touch why he's being educated. There's a disconnect between his education and his dreams. Okay. So basically, he just feels like I have to fulfill all righteousness.
Okay.
So when people are speaking, I'll say, okay, I went to school.
No, it's even currently being preached that whatever you want to do in life, just education.
And that's how we're killing ourselves. You know, so many times we're responding to situations, we are not reacting to them. That's a
Shouldn't we be responding?
No, we should be. We are reacting. Sorry, and not responding. That thing you said now is a reaction to the current situation on ground. The correct thing should have been that you study in the line of what you want to do.
Wow.
That's the difference between the Nigerian youth, the Nigerian education system, and the system abroad. They identify your talents very early, identify your gifts very early, and they begin to groom you along that line solely. But here, we seem to finish our education because we think education is for a meal ticket. So we seem to finish it. Then we now start to decide what to do with it. That's what creates a problem.
I think there's just this general idea that, okay, once you're educated, does not necessarily have to be in the line that you're going into.
And that's what people are doing.
Your brain is already being developed.
No, well, it's a level, but I have a problem with that. It's true, your brain is already being developed, but I have a problem with that. We're always preaching it. I mean, how do we have biochemistry advancement if all our biochemists are working in a bank, for instance? Or if majority of our biochemists are working in a bank, for instance? That's the disadvantage of that. It's that thought process that keeps us where we are. The average American child decides first what he wants to be. The system identifies his gifts and his passions, and he trains along that line. So while he's training, he's not thinking, it's not crossing his mind that he's going to graduate and do something else. He can truly contribute to advancement in that area.
Now, something that people have said is responsible, that is aiding the Americans, is because it's their language. You're learning in your language. Whatever it is you want to become, it's in your language. Everything is something you understand what exactly was going on. But here in Nigeria, many people have said there's a disconnect when it comes to language, the language of learning, what you're learning. Sometimes people actually want to be doctors. But unfortunately, along the line, it just seems being a doctor is too much of a sacrifice because you're not getting it and you're wasting your time. So I think I'd rather be a fashion designer, and everything just changes along the line. Now, Dr. Kusaidi, how would you say that the language of learning helps in, he talked about application earlier. What role is language playing in the education of the youth in Nigeria?
Well, you started by talking about the language of learning. I think what that means is that the language in which you start your primary education, your initial education.
Is that the most important one?
Well, Nigerians have been put, especially lately, have been put in a funny situation. Already we talked about the American child, or maybe we could talk about the British child or the German child or whichever. But all these children start their education, their literacy in their mother tongue. It is the language in which the first language they learned. The majority of Nigerians do not do that. They start learning, they start speaking whatever Nigerian language it is, and then they go to school and they start learning English. And it is in English that they then go around, they continue their education. So it's always problematic at the start, there's no doubt about that. But I don't think we should talk too much about that, because that's a massive field on its own. The issue of the first language, the language in which you start your education. What is simply, also lately things are different. Even if you are Yoruba now, people start bringing up their children speaking English right from the beginning.
Yes.
Right. So that is a bit of a different situation. And as I said, it's a massive field. You can start talking about, for example, whether the English you are even letting your children speak is
the
right
correct one. Yes.
So I don't know. I mean, there are parents that will tell your child, fall down. Now, instead of saying prostrate.
Fall down. Oh
That they don't, even the parents themselves are probably not that well grounded in the English that they teach. So maybe we shouldn't go so much into that. But what is clear is the fact that the literacy in English, I have to say, helps a lot of people, children growing up, because of the fact that that is the language of instruction, right? In Nigeria, and you have no choice. Willy-nilly, you have to learn it. It's the language of instruction.
We won't delve into that, but I have a question relating to that.
Okay.
Some people would say that multilingualism is the reason we are losing some of our local languages, some of our local dialects. Like, is that right?
I don't think that's the right word. Multilingualism is simply the ability to speak more than two, languages. Bilingualism is two languages, and more than two would be multilingualism. It's actually positive. Multilingualism is always a positive thing, in many ways. So if you're talking about losing the languages, the Nigerian languages, it's not because of multilingualism, it is because of the lack of awareness about educating our people, learning these languages, learning how to read and write them. So we need to learn, we need to put more effort into making sure that while English is important, and it's good because we are in a country where you can't have people starting by speaking just their native language and reading and writing their native languages only. In a Nigeria that is now so intertwined that it's no longer possible for you to say, all right, everybody in this area, they are speaking Yoruba. I mean, maybe in some villages, yes. But in a big city like Ibadan here or Lagos, for example, that's no longer possible. What is more important is that we do not neglect these languages. We learn to read and write in those languages apart from learning to read and write in English. That is a matter of policy though. So government has to make sure that, for example, every school has, in that area where the school is located, teachers that will be able to teach the children in those languages, the language spoken in that area.
Okay, you want to say something?
Okay, yeah. I wanted to talk about the value we place on our indigenous languages.
I was just going to talk about that because he said something about multilingualism being always a positive thing. So should we be looking at multilingualism in languages outside our country or the Yoruba language? There
are several dimensions of multilingualism.
Okay, please.
But what we're coming from, the fact that her question, when she talked about the fact that we're losing some of this language, we don't place the right values on them.
Okay.
That's the issue. And another issue is urban-rural migration. For drawing from my own personal example, I was privileged to have my paternal grandmother live with us. And she did not speak English, so you were compelled. In fact, the woman is very interesting. She once fought a Calabar girl for not speaking Yoruba.
Well,
you understand? So, but growing up and speaking English, one of the things I found out is that so many things make sense more in English because you can interpret them from your mother tongue.
Sure.
So many things make a lot more sense in English because you speak good Yoruba. So, but we have a challenge in our society. We don't place the right values. That's why I don't like it when you call an indigenous language vernacular. I make it a point of duty to correct whoever does that. Or when I hear someone say local language, or when I hear anyone refer to anything indigenous to us as local, I make it a point of duty to correct you. Because it first comes with the value you place on your language.
Maybe local is not in that context. Maybe it's in the geographical context.
No. Most times when people say
local village,
it carries a tint of inferior. You find out that what happens in this now is that a child does not speak Yoruba and she's proud. She's a Yoruba girl. She cannot pronounce her name correctly.
Somebody still asked someone I know yesterday. Somebody played something for me, and someone in the car asked, can she speak Yoruba? And she was with
Spanish. I can speak French.
Do you understand? She feels fly. I think the correct thing is efficacy, eloquence, and at both languages. Whether your multilingualism is in the indigenous languages or in the foreign language, because we cannot also focus on our indigenous languages at the detriment of the foreign languages. He talked about policy. I used to crack a very interesting joke. I mean, how do you teach a person something in Yoruba, for instance, because we're in Ibadan, and he writes the exam in English? He will fail woefully. Does he have the information? Yes. Can he communicate it? No. And the marker will not mark his intention. So we need to first look at the value we place on those languages, and we need to see the relevance of those languages to our lives. Your language connects you to your culture, and your culture extremely defines you. Your culture stabilizes you. You may not value the importance of your culture until you live in a place where there are multicultures. And you see that what really shapes you, what really stands you out, what really helps you to stand as an individual is the strong foundation of the culture that you're coming from. That's what I wanted to do.
Looking, Dr. Olanre, taking a look at multilingualism with respect to international communities, the fact that doesn't necessarily translate to bridging cultural gaps. The fact that I can understand your language does not necessarily mean I would understand your culture or accept it. Does it really translate to that?
Well, it's a start, isn't it? I mean, it's difficult for me to understand a language, a culture, or it's easier for me to understand a language when I understand the culture. It's easier for me to understand a culture when I understand the language. Because also, in the course of learning the language, I get to know about the culture. It's not possible for you to learn a language and not know about that culture. You may not be totally immersed in it, you may not be perfect in it, but learning a language equates to learning part of that culture, of that language. So certainly learning other languages, be it the local ones, the Nigerian ones, sorry about that, or the foreign ones, it automatically means you are learning the culture, and it means, of course, you are getting closer to understanding those people better. And these are the things that will help us. All this, xenophobia, or what do we call it, that's been going on in South Africa, for example. It's a matter also of ignorance about other people and other cultures. And
in our case in Nigeria, I mean, some people have identified the fact that the open doors to English language and their culture and their ways is what is eroding our own identity as a people. Does it mean that if we open the door to Germans now and their language and their culture, and you go to the Scottish, their language, their culture, and you go to, before you know it, do we even know who we are anymore? Do we have that danger inherent?
No, I don't think so. There are many different scenarios that have happened in the past concerning English and whether we should call it, for example, a foreign language. It's the great and now late writer Chinua Achebe always said no. While Wale Soyinka would say no, English is foreign and we should adopt another language, and unfortunately the other language he suggested was also foreign to Nigeria simply because it's an African language, Swahili, which is suggested, it's also foreign to Nigeria. And meanwhile, English is no longer foreign. It's no longer a foreign language to us. It's no longer that. All you need to do is read things like books like Things Fall Apart or Arrow of God, all these books by Chinua Achebe, where you feel like he's speaking Igbo but using English words. So he has, and it's no longer. A lot of other writers have modeled their writing, to mirror what he's been doing. So I don't think that being exposed to other languages it brings something, takes something away from your own culture. Certainly your culture will remain yours. And learning other languages and knowing other cultures, it simply adds to who you are. It makes you understand, it makes you educated. We're talking about education, we're talking about literacy. This is what makes you educated. Educated means having acquired knowledge. That's what education means.
That's as individuals.
Yes.
As a nation.
Yeah, well, the nation is made up of individuals. Right? So it is what we as a nation, the more we know. We talk about corruption, about the fact that in our society, the leaders are not, they're not doing what we want them to do all the time. One major reason is that people are not very knowledgeable about what's going on in other parts of the world. If they are, they demand more from their government. So that is why, coming back to the topic of literacy and multilingualism, that is why it is so important for us to make sure that we propagate this idea that people have to be able to read and write well. Not just reading and writing, but reading and writing in order to be able to engage yourself in critical thinking. It is when you think critically that you can now question what's going on in society. Is this right? Is this wrong? But I have to develop my mind first before I can be able to think critically.
And I think that's even when solution profiling can begin to happen.
Yes. And if I want to develop my mind, I must read. If I don't read, I can't. It's not just a matter of people talking. Immersing yourself in
I see you've been trying to. You want to say something?
Yeah, I don't think that it's because we're exposed to other cultures. I think it's because we don't value. We're not deliberate. The Chinese, or the Indian, for instance, even though he speaks English, there is a certain deliberate consciousness in preserving his own culture. So it's not deliberate. It's just, and it's because somewhere we kind of feel that our culture, our language is inferior. Kind of, because that's where people who don't speak it are not even They don't know that they are missing anything.
But then you see people who can't speak English well feel sad. There's this sadness. Like, I wish I could speak
This
English.
inferiority
But that's a
complex, like
societal issue.
That's a societal issue. So that's why our language is eroding. It's not because we're exposed to.
The language.
Then I wanted to say that the world is a global village now. In the context of a global village, no nation or no people can actually survive in isolation. You need to get to a point where you understand diverse cultures. You may not practice it, but you need to understand diverse cultures. It helps you to relate better, even in business, because there are things that, I mean, where I come from, they say that how this is what we do in our home, in our own house. It's an abomination elsewhere. So in relating with people across cultures, especially internationally, you know exactly how to relate with them. So many business deals have been lost and won, not just based on competence basically, but based on an understanding of the person's culture. So there are cultural indices that you violate and you can lose a lot of things. So it's actually important for us to understand some of these things, and it first comes from us having a mindset that these things are not bad, they are good. I need to understand my own is good. I need to also understand others, so I can relate to them. There will be a lot more tolerance in the world. You will know why a person does what he does. You will know why he's angry at some things. You will know which words to use. You will know which words not to use. You will know exactly how to behave. I mean, even across our culture, there are some basic arguments. Some cultures will say that, I mean, let me use the Yoruba culture. They say that the Yoruba culture is, I mean, Yorubas are difficult and all that. I'm like, no, Yoruba culture is just delicate. It doesn't believe that you need to be verbally told everything. So when you're dealing with a Yoruba man, he expects you to pick non-verbal clues. And if you don't know, you could just kill yourself. Ditto for French, for German and other languages. So that's my contribution.
Now, with all of this, I mean, every year International Literacy Day is being celebrated, and some people would say that there is no deliberateness on the part of Nigeria to want to propagate some of the values that the day and the celebration stands for. So now that this has come forth again, and the theme being literacy and multilingualism, where do you see Nigeria standing or benefiting from this? Let's take your take.
Well, first things first, any celebration of literacy or any situation where you're bringing attention to literacy means you are also bringing attention to those that teach, because literacy has, I mean, you tend to focus a lot on teachers too, because they are the teachers that do it. So for us, and for me as a university teacher, the literacy day, the International Literacy Day is always an important occasion. Right? So what, as I said earlier, we need to emphasize on as Nigerians is the fact that the more literate our population is, and you know there are different degrees of literacy. Just being able to read and write and say it is a basket, it is a book, it's not necessarily the kind of literacy we're talking about. We're talking about literacy that at least you being able to take a book and read it, read newspapers. We are now, as my friend here said, the world is a global village. You read news on the internet and so forth. It makes you simply more aware of not just your own environment, but also of the world at large. And as I said, when that is the case, then you are in a position to engage yourself in critical thinking. The more we are able to demand of our leaders, the more our leaders will have to respect our opinions and then work to do what we want them to do. When we are using, when you are literate enough to engage in critical thinking, this is what happens. On the side of multilingualism, what it does, you know, because I was telling you about the importance of multilingualism, is that it helps us widen our horizons. And you know, I mean, I'm not just talking about multilingualism, being able to speak Igbo and Yoruba and Hausa. That's also a very, very important thing, because it widens your horizons within the country. We are living together. We need to know one another better. The Hausas, the Igbos, and Efik and Edo and so forth. Right, so it's very important. But in terms of the international way of looking at it, we also need to widen our horizons by learning the languages of other countries especially advanced countries, because what we want to do is we don't want to remain as another developed country. We want to advance, we want to develop, and if we want to develop, then we need to know a lot more about how the developed countries do their things. And we've done a lot in that area in terms of knowing how maybe the English-speaking people of America or Britain, how they do their things, and it seems it's not enough. So let us widen our horizons and learn even other languages internationally. I am a language, I teach German, so for me it's important to stress that. So
I think we should have greeted you Good Morgen or something. That would have helped.
No, you may have been totally thrown off by the response.
That's probably the only thing I understand. Anything you say, I will just.
No, the only thing I can say there is that it sounds German. So that
Sounds German. Wow.
So don't let me say too much. But you certainly have something. If you say it, I wouldn't think you are speaking another language. I would say it.
You say,
even if I still have to correct something minor. But the fact remains that
correct me. You correct me eventually. Please, let's have your final take, Mr. Olasode.
Okay, the question was, where is Nigeria?
Yes, when it comes to not where is. I think it's obvious where Nigeria is. I'm saying this year has come again for us to celebrate literacy.
Okay.
And now the focus is on multilingualism and literacy. Where do we see Nigeria benefiting, in your own view, and how can we actually benefit as a nation?
Well, we can benefit. I see it's possible. There is a possibility of those benefits. Okay. But however, if I give you something, it doesn't become yours until you take it. The benefits come with harnessing some with taking some certain steps, and those steps. That's what I spoke about, a deliberateness. There are some things we cannot leave to chance. We have spoken extensively about the importance of multilingualism and how it helps you to understand, how it helps you to access things. But now, what do we begin to do? There are things that we need to do to harness the benefits of literacy and multilingualism. He's been speaking so much about literacy being the ability to assess, interpret, and deploy information. But now we have a situation where we need to be deliberate in raising such people if we want to move forward. But it appears that we are not deliberate, and some unhealthy, let me say that because I'm on TV, some unhealthy politicians are deliberately cultivating what we have, because people where we are now are easy to manipulate. There are questions that you will not be asked in your constituency unless they are literate. So this situation is favorable to them, you understand? But if we are going to move forward, we need to get out of that and create a situation where we are really, really, really moving forward. Because movement and motion, they are two different things.
So we're currently moving. Are we in motion?
I'm waiting for help.
Okay.
This is a very, very, very convenient place to wrap this up. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being on the show. We have been speaking with public affairs analyst, Mr. Dr. Olasode, and a language expert and German guru, Dr. Larry Okuseyinde. So teach me how to say good morning now.
Guten Morgen.
What did I say?
That's what she said.
No, that was not what she said.
Do you understand,
Okay.
German?
No, I just heard what you said.
We are on the same ship. You can't do that.
Oh my
We'll
God.
take a break, and then the next segment will be coming up. Stay with us on Breakfast Weekend.